Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to talk to y'all a little bit about what I read this morning. I opened my Bible and God had me go to the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 1. We're starting at the beginning of Daniel. And y'all, just a little background. The book of Daniel was written by Daniel. It was written in the year 536 to 530 BC. This was during the time when King Nebuchadnezzar had he had gone into Jerusalem and taken over, right? So, one thing I want to point out to y'all is that Daniel was most likely just a teenage boy at this time. So, there's a lot of things that God was showing me, and that was one of them because I did not realize that this happened when he was a teenage boy. So, this is the span of his life, right? Anyways, so Nebuchadnezzar has gone in, he's taken over, he's setting up a government. He realizes he don't have enough people wise men to put in place to run the government for Jerusalem, right? So what's he do? He brings in their Jerusalem's, wise men. So Daniel fell in this. Daniel was probably from an affluent family. He was very well educated, and he and his three friends are part of this group that get brought in, right? So now Nebuchadnezzar orders that these guys be fed his food, be given a portion of his wine, this type of thing. Well, in that time, this food had probably been offered to an idol, and that was against everything that Daniel stood for. So what his God stood for. So Daniel's keeping his eyes on God. He is just staying focused. That's the main thing I want y'all to get is that he's staying focused on God. Remember, he's a teenage boy now. So, um, Daniel tells the person that is in authority over this group of boys, group of young wise men, he tells him, he says, look, I can't eat this food. I just can't do it. He said, bring us vegetables. And he's like, I can't. The soldier tells him, he says, I can't. I'm fearing for my life if I don't do what the king said. And the king said to give you a portion of his food. And Daniel tells him, he says, okay, so if you're worried that we might not fare as well on our food as we would the food of the king, let's just do a test. For 10 days, I would like for you to bring us our vegetables. Let us eat the way that we want to eat. At the end of 10 days, you check us out and see how we measure up to these guys that you're feeding the king's food and giving the king's wine to. And the guy's like, yeah, okay, we can do that. So that's what they did. And at the end of the 10 days, Daniel and his friends, the Bible says they were fairer and fatter than the ones who had been fed from the king's food. So that was allowed to continue. So right there, Daniel keeps his faith, right? And that's a small thing, sounds like what you're eating, but it was a big thing to Daniel, and it was the first step of him continuing to walk the path that God gave him to walk, right? So I'm reading through this, and we all have heard the story of Nebuchadnezzar having a dream, and then Daniel goes in and interprets it, right? Well, I never realized Nebuchadnezzar, he brings forth all the sorcerers, the magicians, the astrologers, and he tells them, he's like, I want you to tell me what my dream was, and then I want you to interpret it. I never realized Nebuchadnezzar didn't even tell them what the dream was. I never knew that. I thought, it made sense in my head. Nebuchadnezzar tells them what he dreams, then they tell him what it means. No, they got to tell him what the dream was. So, all these people are like, man, what you talking about? We can't do that. Only God, a true God, a God that has nothing to do with flesh, could tell you that. So Nebuchadnezzar's like, kill them all. Just kill them all. And so they go out, the military's sent out to kill them, and they come to Daniel, and Daniel's like, wait, just give me time, give me, let me do what I got to do, and then I can interpret the dream for King Nebuchadnezzar. So Daniel goes back to his friends, and he's like, hey guys, we're fixing to be killed if we don't come up with the answer to this dream. And no, we don't know what the dream is. We got to figure that out too. So what do? They pray. They pray and they ask God, please God, don't let us die. We're fixing to die if you don't reveal this to us. And what happens? God gives Daniel a dream. And in that dream, he reveals what the dream was that was sent to Nebuchadnezzar and how to interpret it. So then Daniel goes back and he says, okay, so I know what's going on. And can you take me to the king? So they take him to King Nebuchadnezzar, and Nebuchadnezzar sits. Daniel tells him what's going on, what the dream was. He tells him, in this dream, God is revealing to you the future. He's telling you what's going to come to pass. And he explains everything. Oh, that's a whole nother video. But what does Nebuchadnezzar do? King Nebuchadnezzar. Let me put him where he was. He was king. He falls on his face. Let's read it. It says, the king Nebuchadnezzar fell upon his face and did homage to Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and sweet incense to him. So, just to kind of sum it up, Nebuchadnezzar promotes Daniel. Daniel now holds a high position in King Nebuchadnezzar's courts. So, the main thing that God showed me was, Daniel began this journey as a young teenage boy. And as a teenage boy, he didn't lose faith. He kept his eyes on God. He stayed focused. He kept walking the path that God gave him. God used him to reveal a dream to Nebuchadnezzar, and then God made sure he was promoted. So when we live our lives following the instruction that God gives us, we gain favor in God's eyes, which to us means God blesses us. So stay strong in your faith, guys. Never take your eyes off God. Because once you do, and you depend on your own self, life gets so chaotic. Trust me, been there, done that. Now I'm focused. Now I'm keeping my eyes on God. Now I'm submerged in the Word. And I'm trying very hard not to make any decisions in my life without going to God first, like Daniel and his friends did. When their life was hanging in by a thread, they were fixing to be killed. He went to God. God gave him the answer. And not only did he save his life, he promoted him and gave him blessings. Love you guys.